There are lots of things the Western world does not know about the Middle East. This particular thing is the missing link, and it should help you be able to understand what's really going on. Take a listen, folks. This information might radically change your perspective. I'm going to tell you the difference between the United States of America and Israel. And this comes from, not that I believe in intersectionality, not that I believe that my immutable characteristics or traits are the sole foundation for my moral authority. I'm not doing that. So I'm not standing on, I come from Egypt, so I'm an expert. But I will say this, and I can say this with great confidence in a way that most Americans will never be able to understand this. My mom and my dad, being born and raised in Egypt, taught me a very valuable lesson, and that is one regarding our culture. In our culture and in our background in the Middle East, men do not respond to weakness. They do not respond to the mindset that says, well, let's just try to get along and let's have a conversation. The only language that they understand is retaliatory action or preemptive action. It's the way it is. Matter of fact, it's embedded within our very culture. Can I give you an example of this?
Yeah.
We went to Israel. I took my wife to Israel for the first time the year that we got married. And so we went there, and I was thrilled to be able to see her reaction to everything that was around her, right? I mean, she had never seen any of this stuff. And it was awesome to see her, take it all in. Well, when we got to the old city, and she started identifying certain things that she wanted to buy or take home, I told her, I said, okay, baby, let me do the negotiating. So I started by first talking in English. And, when you hear me speak English, you don't hear any other accent. And then pretty soon after I started hearing what they were saying to one another about how much money they had and what they were willing to spend, and then I converted and I started speaking in Arabic, in which they got super angry. They started yelling at me. They were being very aggressive, told me every Arabic curse word in the world, because the moment they hear me start speaking in Arabic, they know that they think that I'm born and raised in Egypt, because the way I speak Arabic, they think that's what's going on. So then my wife expects me to do something that I don't blame her for expecting, right? She expects me to run away with my head in between my legs. She expects me to hear these guys cursing at me and then leave and go find another place to go do some negotiating. And what she witnesses made her strikingly uncomfortable, to the point, bro, where she had to walk away in the middle of the conversation because she was so bothered by what she saw. Now, what bothered her? Well, the moment they started screaming at me and yelling at me and throwing out a bunch of insults, I stopped right in my tracks and I yelled and screamed at them in Arabic, the same way they were yelling and screaming at me, except louder and more aggressively. And I didn't curse. Obviously, they know that my mouth is a Christian mouth, not a Muslim mouth. They had Muslim mouths. But my whole point behind it is they respected that. When we got to the end of that negotiation, we sat down and we had a cup of tea together, right? And had a little bit of a conversation, and then we moved on. And so it got to the point where any place we went to in Israel, my wife literally turned away as though she didn't know me when it was time to negotiate. Not because she was embarrassed by me, but because she could not take the stress, because of her personality and her upbringing and her background, the stress and the pressure of the loud argumentation that is oftentimes involved. Yeah. So think about it like this. If it takes that kind of effort to buy something like a cup or a mug or bread or whatever it is that you might want to talk about in the Middle East, do you think that these Arabs are going to respond well to an American or westernized mentality that says, let's stand and protest on their behalf and let's try to embrace them and hug them and make peace? It doesn't work that way. No, it doesn't. You come and you do what you did to Israel, you better darn well expect that Israel is going to respond in the same Middle Eastern language that they are familiar with. Mm-hmm. And they are going to slap the living you-know-what out of them, right? Because that's what has to come back. And anybody who's westernized that doesn't understand that isn't going to ever understand it, because they don't know our language. They don't know our culture. They don't know our background. Yeah. Now, what that creates for us is a massive war footing, because that's where we're headed towards.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd say we are. I'd say we are. It seems to me like the U.S. is, and everything that I've read, that the White House is actually in kind of a panic right now because they are in over their heads. They've basically admitted that this isn't an area where they feel comfortable in, which they don't have an area they feel comfortable in anything really. They have a policy that I refer to and have in many times in the past called jellyfishing, and that is where you come in to try and fix a situation, and instead of fixing it, you create a multitude more, right? And that's what we're doing in the Middle East. We have no business over there other than supporting Israel. Us trying to get in and negotiate peace deals and all these other things that we're trying to bring them to the table, it's to me, we don't belong there. We belong there as a support role, but that is Israel's to determine and to make happen, in my opinion, because they need to control their own destiny, just like in the situation they are now. They don't need somebody in there telling them what they can and cannot do. They need to be able to act as they deem necessary to act. It just blows me away. We don't do that with any other country. Well, we're usually the ones stirring up things in every other country. Really, let me just kind of back that up. You can go to anywhere in Africa and you can look at what happens with the coups, and I guarantee it, if you were a fly on the wall when those things started to go down, you'd recognize that there were some agency boys in the mix in every bit of that, right?
Oh, 100%.
So,
yeah, 100%.
But yeah, when you start talking about wars and rumors of wars, I mean, look around the world. Everybody is squaring off at each other. Everybody. Oh, you go into Africa, and the whole center of Africa is basically in some type of destabilization effort. You go over to Asia, right? You get into that area with China and Taiwan. That's very unstable. You get into the Middle East and everybody's throwing rocks at each other. It really is. The world is a powder keg right now. And I don't see, this is a thing that I think is very obvious, at least to me, and probably people that follow us would probably agree with us, but most Americans probably don't get it. But there is no one on the planet right now de-escalating any of this. In fact, everybody is just like poker face, pushing all the chips onto the table and saying, we're all in. Whatever it takes, let's do it. Because I think that they see their economies are about to just completely go in the tank, and they're trying to avoid that at all costs. Right? They can't afford to do it, especially after the COVID thing and everybody's economy slowed down to a crawl. They can't afford to do that. Their countries will collapse. And so they've got to do something to stimulate their economies. And war is an economy.
Yeah, it's absolutely right, bro. And then when you bring in, and forgive me for saying this because I'm going to say it and I have no problem saying it, when you bring in animals, complete animals, like the UN Secretary General, who is now basically blaming Israel for the attacks by Hamas.
It is important to also recognize the attacks by Hamas did not happen in a vacuum. The Palestinian people have been subjected to 56 years of suffocating occupation.
And the problem with this kind of nonsense, right? If this type of rhetoric doesn't stop by the international community, we are going to end up seeing a new war, the likes of which we have not seen. We are on a footing of something like World War III at a scale that is much larger than World War II and World War I combined. And people hear me say that and they go, James, no way, that's insane. But what you don't get is, well, you get it, but what most people don't get is the advent of technology from within the context of that type of warfare and what that can actually do. And that, to me, is the bigger problem. Monkey, let me ask you this question before we carry this thought through.
Okay.
How many fronts do you think the United States of America is prepared to fight on? Right now, a significant investment has been made in Ukraine. I don't know if I'm going to even call that a war front yet. Okay.
Yeah.
What I would like to call a war front, or what I think is going to end up being a war front, is a makeshift NATO broken alliance war front, probably around Poland. I'll just call it a Warsaw, a broken Warsaw NATO front. Okay. How many real fronts is the United States of America prepared to fight on? Because here's my concern. With the aircraft carrier groups that are in the Mediterranean right now, I think the United States of America is trying to insinuate that they're ready to fight on two fronts. They're ready to complement any existing efforts in the Red Sea and the Persian Gulf that they have right now to maintain some semblance of order, which means they're trying to say that they're ready to engage in the Middle East, but their position, they're in that portion, right, in that little area, I think also mandates that they be prepared to fight on a Western European front potentially. And if let's just say we're not even talking about a Western European front. I think their position in the Mediterranean is going to force them to defend assets in Greece and potentially Rome, depending on the actions of Erdogan and Turkey, right?
Yeah.
But the bigger front that I'm more concerned about is further north, right? What happens if this ends up becoming a full-blown engagement and not just Iran starts getting involved, but Russia starts getting involved? That hook, right?
Yeah.
And we're not talking about Ezekiel 38, by the way. When I use the term hook, I'm referencing Ezekiel 38, but I'm not talking about that actual battle.
Yeah.
How many fronts is the United States prepared to fight on, bro? Because they're not going to be defending the homeland at this point. What would you say?
Yeah. Well, so let's talk about from the fight perspective, kind of break that into two different sides, right? Offensive, defensive. Okay. Defensively, I think if you had all the assets back here in the United States, you could probably defend off quite a few attacks if you needed to. Offensively, because of the amount of equipment we've given Ukraine, I don't think that we are in a position to do anything big. I think we are probably, you're talking, like, for example, if Iran starts to spool things up and they start attacking Israel and their proxies start kind of mixing in more so than Iran, there's a reason I think Iran is still here in Ezekiel 38, and that's because I don't think they get into any major direct confrontation with anybody up to that point. Their proxies, absolutely, right? And when I say their proxies, I'm talking about, Hezbollah, and at a distance, maybe Hamas, because even though they're not really from the same sects, right? But then the Houthis, right? You've got all these different proxies that kind of go out there and fight. They're terrorist organizations, but fight on behalf of Iran, right? Now, I could see us at going after, countries like Yemen or Lebanon or something along those lines to a limited degree with success. But we got to be very careful, because the more we shoot off and pop off into those two countries, the more our own inventories start to kind of deplete, right? That, I think, is what is the bigger concern, because I think we're in a position right now where we don't have what it takes to take on somebody like Russia. I think China is a major threat, even though if you look at where our ships are around the world, we've got two, down in the Philippines, we've got the Reagan, and then we've got the America, which is off the coast of Japan. But for the most part, we don't really have a lot of presence in the Asian Pacific realm, right? We started actually bringing a lot of that stuff into Ukraine and borrowing from other countries and feeding that into Ukraine, because we thought maybe Ukraine could hold Russia back and Russia would stop, but that didn't happen. And so what we've done is we've depleted everything we had in the Asian Pacific. And so now what we have is basically a limited force that's there to keep basically North Korea in check. There's nothing there that's going to keep China in check if China decides to go hot and go after Taiwan. They're going to just do it and it'll be done. So yeah, I mean, I would say maybe 1.25 that we could probably take on right now, just because we don't have the arsenal that we had before to really hold up a long-term war. We just don't. We've given it all to Ukraine.
So we're in massive trouble.
Oh, we're in deep kimchi, my brother. Let me tell you.
I mean, I think that should be said, and I bring this up because if we stop for a moment to reflect upon the brevity of everything that we are discussing right now, I need people to understand something critical that we've been emphasizing from the very beginning, and it's one that cannot be ignored, and that centers around the fact that the United States of America, well, let me back up. When Ezekiel 38 happens, which I believe will happen after the rapture, there will be no nation to defend it. God is the only one that ends up defending Israel, right?
That's right.
Now, right now, the United States of America is saying, probably to increase the lining of certain pockets right now, we stand by Israel, when in reality, all they're doing is they're stopping Israel. They're making it more difficult for
they're
Israel.
hindering them. Yes, absolutely.
They're hindering Israel.
Yeah.
Right? Whether or not you're giving them, you can give them a million missiles to feed their batteries. You're still hindering Israel. And they're doing it for a lot of reasons. The complexities oftentimes associated with the engagement rules become a whole lot more complex. By the way, I think that this was done on purpose. I think that the current regime in office went to Israel specifically to stop Israel from doing what they're doing, knowing full well that Israel has made the determination. And by the way, they're not changing their mind. Yeah. They have made the determination that the ROEs that the international community have put on them, the bullcaca ones, the ones that are completely double standard, are no longer going to be the ROEs that they follow. They're not going to follow those rules of engagement. They are going to engage in a new mechanism that says defend our people at all costs. This is a fight for their lives. This is not an idealistic fight. This is not a fight that says this is for the homeland. No, this is we die if we don't fight. So they're going to aggressively respond. And the problem with this is the complexities associated with what happened when they respond that way, and the United States is there in their presence, is going to make things significant. So we either are going to need to see a full withdrawal of some sort or another of the United States of America, or the United States of America is going to remain silent while secretly engaging in another area that's going to end up coming out in full fruition, which will eventually bring us into a world war type of an environment. It has to be. Because whether or not Article 5 means anything to a lot of the members of the alliance that is at hand, even in this region, there's going to come a point in time where they are going to be forced to act as an alliance of nations. And part of NATO, yes, is going to fail and is going to fold, but they are going to act. The UN is going to act. They have made it very, very clear, the anti-Semitic stand that they are taking. They don't have much of a peacekeeping force, as they would call it. The United Nothing is a bunch of they're just symbolic nonsense. But the EU, the very moment the EU starts getting engaged, we're going to have a major problem on our hands, bro. And I'm telling you right now, this is going to be way worse than the United States of America blowing up the Japanese imperial forces. Yeah. There's going to be a lot more civilian casualties that are what everybody calling civilian casualties. And this is going to end up being a war the likes we have never seen. And and maybe I'm wrong. I don't think I am.
No, I don't either. Now, when you start talking about Ezekiel 38, you start talking about the fact that there are a couple countries that actually that are there for Israel. All right, like Egypt, for example. Right now, I don't see that, and I think it's an interesting piece. You can see Egypt is actually kind of along the same lines with all of the other people surrounding Israel right now, in terms of, their rhetoric and the things that they're saying about Gaza and getting aid in and all the other stuff. So, and I think that is key to all of this, because it gives you an indicator on the timing of things. Like you said, when Ezekiel 38 will kick in. I definitely think we're seeing the precursors to all of that. I think Isaiah 17 is on the table, that we could see Damascus just go bye-bye. And that may be the final shot that actually brings everybody to the table for peace. Because if Israel wipes Damascus off the face of the earth, then all of a sudden people may go, whoa, wait a minute. That's like dad just slapped mom at the dinner table. Everybody's going to be like, whoa, wait, what just happened? That could be what actually is the catalyst that brings everybody to the table.
I'm going to say it again because it's important. We are about to face an incursion like we have never seen in the Middle East in the last.
Yeah.
Like we have done it. It's going to be something for not of the faint of heart. Gaza is going to get flattened. It's going to happen. I don't know if people realize it's going to get ugly, monkey.
Ugly. Yeah, it is. It straight up is. You're talking old school Bible stuff here. This is, you're talking David, this is Old Testament type of of battle that is about to be fought. That you don't send food in to your enemy so that you're strengthening them for the fight. You starve them out, you cut off the power, you do everything you have to do to weaken your enemy, and then you go in and slay them. That is, I mean, if you look at, I mean, think about this. For the most part, when you talk about Israel, they are not Messianic Jews. They are Old Testament Jews. They still, they follow the Levitican laws and all the other things like that, right? I mean, this is what you are dealing with when it comes to that, and that's their old school of thought. They're not, they're not New Testament kind of folks, man. And that's where I think we have that separation between our belief system and theirs, even though we all believe in the same God. There's something fundamentally different in our approaches. And let's just say it that way, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more, bro. And I think that we're finding ourselves in a position where I'm not so sure if we can quantify what it's going to look like or describe what it's going to look like. I honestly, I can say this with confidence. I don't know what's next, bro. In terms of the United States of America. Now, I can tell you the end game, right? Like, I can tell you what to expect and what I know is going to happen eventually, and that is the fact that we're going to become inconsequential. The United States of America is going to become kaput. It's going to be, we're done, right? The question is how fast is that going to happen? How soon are we going to see that taking place? I think that's the question in front of us. And then if we enter into a world war, which I believe we will, what happens next on the biblical front? That's another question that a lot of people are asking. And what I think ends up happening, if that takes place, is you have a reprieve for a certain amount of years, because the extreme that our world went to has to be normalized by a very quick and radical waking up of a lot of people who are seeing common sense, change, repent, whatever you want to call it. And we begin to see God giving us a bit of a reprieve, things slow down, and then eventually the whole end times calendar kicks in. Either that or it accelerates everything we know is going to happen. We start to see the beginning of the end. And I kind of think that we're there. I think, look, at the bare minimum, we are in this section of Matthew 24 where Jesus says this is going to be commonplace. We're going to be seeing wars and rumors of wars. Jesus said that would be a regular part of what we deal with every day in life leading up to the last days. But the thing that is interesting is the use of the terminology birth pangs, right? That the birth pangs are increasing.
Oh,
that's the concern. That's the concern.
Well, look, let's you talk about what happens to the United States. How does this all play out? Do we roll into, this area and then I mean, if you look at the Mediterranean and you look at who's to the north and who's to the south, right? Most of our allies are going to be to the north until you get beyond Ukraine, you get into Russia and everything else, which is not. But most of our allies are to the north when you're going into the Mediterranean, but to the south of the Mediterranean, that's where it starts to get interesting, because Libya is occupied by the Russians, and that is a very big, broad span. From Egypt all the way over to Tunisia. That's a big area that the Russians occupy, and we know they're in Tripoli, we know they're in Benghazi, because when we bailed out, they came in and basically filled the void. So as you're running into the Mediterranean, you are to your right. If you're on an aircraft carrier, on your right side is your enemy, and on your left is people that you think are friend at the moment. But this could get really, really interesting, because it's not just a matter of somebody like Iran coming in and with their proxies taking pot shots at the United States. You could actually have Russia start to facilitate things to the southern side of our flank, so to speak, right? That could change the dynamics of everything going on there right now. Just be still and just get that time away from all of this. Go find you a quiet place and just have that minute, have that hour, whatever you can spare, right now, and talk to God. You know, you got to put it on his, take all of this stress and everything, put it on his plate. Cause that's exactly what he tells us to do, is that, you know, that we're not supposed to try and handle it ourselves. We're supposed to give it all to him. And so that's what I would tell people, is just give it all to him, let go, let God, and just know that this is all part of the plan. And, you know, you feel like, oh my God, I'm just a number. I'm going to get, you know, squashed in all of this. You know, we all have a role in this, 1,000,000%, whatever that role may be. But we have all been chosen for this very time. Right. And, and that's what we have to just, you know, keep in mind, keep in our sight.